So you're here because you want to cut through the noise,
Yeah,
right? Get straight to what really matters on a topic without, getting bogged down.
exactly. Understand the core issue fast.
Well, that's what we're doing today. We're taking a deep dive into something specific from Maui, those proposed new car rental taxes for 2025, the ones meant to fund the Lahaina bypass extension.
That's the one.
What actually happened with that? That's what we're digging into.
Precisely. We're looking at a report from May 1st, 2025. It lays out the details on Senate Bill 1659, how it went through the Hawaii legislature.
Okay.
And it really explains why that tax didn't happen and, importantly, what that means for funding the highway project going forward.
Got it. So let's get right into it. What was the basic idea behind Senate Bill 1659? What was it trying to do?
Well, the main goal, the primary purpose, was to set up a specific way to fund revenue bonds.
Okay, bonds.
Yeah, and those bonds would then provide the money needed to extend the Lahaina Bypass Highway on Maui. So think of it as a special fund just for this project.
Right, a dedicated funding stream. And I remember hearing about this earlier in the year. It wasn't totally out of the blue.
No, that's right. The bill actually first showed up back in January 2025. Yeah. And the initial talk was around adding a $3 per day fee onto rental cars there.
Yeah.
There on Maui. That was the proposed mechanism.
$3 a day. Seems straightforward enough on the surface, but obviously it didn't make it through. What were the roadblocks? Why did it fail?
Well, there were a couple of really key sticking points. First off, the lawmakers themselves just couldn't seem to land on the same page about some really basic parts of the tax.
Like what?
Like, get this. In the amended version of the bill, the actual dollar amount for the daily tax, it was just left blank.
Blank. Seriously. That's a pretty fundamental thing to leave out. Doesn't sound like much agreement there.
Suggests a pretty significant lack of consensus, yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't only the amount. There was also a lot of back and forth about how long the tax should last.
Ah.
Initially, the idea was 10 years. But later on, some suggested pushing it out to maybe 30 years.
Whoa, okay. 10 years versus 30 years is a massive difference.
Huge difference in commitment, absolutely. 10 years feels temporary, sort of. 30 years. That starts to feel like a permanent fixture on your rental bill.
Exactly. And it wasn't just disagreement among the legislators, right? Didn't some state departments have issues too?
Oh, definitely. Several departments raised some pretty serious concerns. The Hawaii Department of Transportation, for example, they questioned whether the whole financial structure was really sustainable long-term.
Okay, could it actually keep funding the project reliably?
That seemed to be the question, yeah. Was it a sound way to fund something this big?
Makes sense. And what about the Department of Taxation? What were their worries?
They were pretty blunt, actually. They basically said they didn't have the systems ready to go to collect this new tax and, crucially, earmark it specifically for this project.
Ah, the practicalities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Building that kind of specific collection infrastructure, it takes time, it takes resources. Apparently, they didn't feel they had that ready.
So logistical hurdles on top of the disagreements. Sounds like there is a fair bit of doubt swirling around this bill.
There really was. You have the Tax Review Commission, for instance. They put out a pretty critical assessment. They actually compared this proposal to policies they considered a departure from Hawaii's sound fiscal policies.
Ouch. That's not good. Strong language.
Very strong warning, yeah. And they weren't the only ones.
I thought I remembered another group weighing in.
Yes, the Hawaii Tax Foundation. They also came out against it. Their argument was interesting. They said it creates a bypass not of Lahaina traffic, but of the legislative budgeting and appropriation process.
Meaning it was like a workaround for the usual funding methods.
That was their concern, yeah.
Yeah.
That was kind of sidestepping the normal legislative debate and decision-making process for how state money gets allocated.
So the pushback wasn't just about, is this a good tax, but also about, is this the right way to fund things?
Precisely. And you saw all this reflected in how the bill moved, or rather, didn't move through the legislature. It got stuck in the Senate Committee for Transportation, Culture, and the Arts around mid-February, and it just sat there. Never made it to a full vote before the session ended.
So it just died in committee, effectively.
Yeah.
No vote, no final decision, just fizzled out.
That's what happened.
Okay. So the new tax is off the table, at least for now. But Maui still needs that Lahaina bypass extension. How's that likely to get funded then?
Well, the most probable path forward is that the state will need to fund it through the existing state highway fund.
The regular pot of money for highway projects.
Exactly. The same fund that pays for other highway work across Hawaii. It just becomes another project in the queue, funded through those established mechanisms.
And remind us what flows into that state highway fund. It's not just one thing, is it?
Oh, no, it's quite a mix. You've got the obvious ones like fuel taxes, which you pay at the pump,
Right.
then vehicle registration fees, vehicle weight taxes,
The standard stuff when you own a car.
pretty much. But then there are also the existing rental motor vehicle surcharges taxes already on rentals.
Oh, okay. So rentals are already contributing there.
Significantly, as we'll see. Also, tour vehicle surcharges, fees from your periodic motor vehicle inspections, interest earned on the money sitting in the fund, penalties for things like overweight trucks, even rent from state properties along highways, fees for special overweight permits, and sometimes money from selling off surplus state land.
Wow, okay. That's quite a diverse list of revenue streams already going into that fund.
It is.
Which, makes you circle back to that question the report raises, was this new additional tax really essential?
That's a key question, isn't it? And some people definitely questioned if the bill was truly necessary from a purely financial standpoint.
Right.
There was also some speculation, given that the bill's sponsor was a representative from the Lahaina district, that maybe there was a political angle.
Oh, so?
Well, the idea was floated that maybe it was partly a move to, appeal to constituents, perhaps tapping into that anti-visitor sentiment. You sometimes see the feeling that tourists should pay more.
Playing to the tourists don't pay their fair share narrative. That's a common theme in tourist spots.
It really is. And interestingly, the public support the bill did get seemed to come mainly from certain citizen groups. Their argument was that tourism is a high-impact industry and should be taxed more heavily to cover its use of public resources like roads.
Okay, the argument being more tourists equals more wear and tear, so they should contribute more directly. Makes logical sense on one level.
It does, but then you have to balance that against tourism's economic role.
Which is huge on Maui.
Absolutely massive. According to the Maui Economic Development Board, tourism is responsible for something like 70 cents of every dollar generated on the island.
70%. That's enormous.
It is. The County of Maui's own revenue overview puts it a bit lower, around 30% of GDP. But either way, it's clearly the dominant economic engine. Way bigger than construction or agriculture.
So yeah, tourism has impacts, but it's also paying most of the bills, essentially. And it's not like visitors escape taxes altogether, right?
Not at all. There's already the transient accommodation tax, the TAT, that big tax on hotel rooms and vacation rentals.
Right, you see that on your bill.
And as we mentioned, there are already those existing rental car taxes and surcharges, which, as a previous blog post we saw noted, can already add a pretty hefty chunk to the final cost of renting a car.
So the idea that tourists aren't contributing is just not accurate.
Not really, no. In fact, there was some testimony from Enterprise Commute that really highlights this. They pointed out something quite striking.
What was that?
While rental cars make up only about 5% of all the vehicles registered in the state,
Okay, tiny slice.
the existing rental car surcharge alone generates almost a third, 32.4% of all the revenue going into the state highway fund.
Whoa, wait, say that again? 5% of the cars generate over 32% of the highway money.
That's what their testimony stated, 32.4%.
Wow. That really puts the whole taxing tourists more debate into a different light, doesn't it? They're already contributing disproportionately through car rentals.
It certainly adds significant context, yeah. A relatively small group paying a very large share of that particular fund.
Okay, so given all this, the legislative failure, the existing funding streams, the contribution already coming from rentals, what's the outlook now? Is this idea completely dead?
Well, it's a bit uncertain, to be honest. As the report kind of hints, sometimes in politics, no news is good news, right? It might just mean the bill has been quietly dropped.
Put on the shelf?
Possibly. But it's also entirely possible that the core idea, maybe a modified version of the tax, could pop up again in a future legislative session. We'll have to wait and see.
Right. So for anyone planning a trip and renting a car in Maui in 2025, the immediate takeaway is no new specific tax for the Lahaina bypass hitting your bill.
Correct. For now, that specific proposal is off the table.
But the underlying issue isn't going away, is it? how to pay for essential infrastructure in a place so heavily shaped by tourism.
Exactly. That fundamental challenge of balancing infrastructure needs, the economic impact of tourism, and, fair taxation policies, that's an ongoing, complex juggling act.
It definitely is. And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? When you consider how much money already comes from vehicle fees and taxes, especially that huge chunk from rental car surcharges, it really makes you wonder. What is the fairest, most effective way for states to spread the financial burden of keeping up our roads and highways among everyone who uses and benefits from them? Something to chew on.